His dear old dad treated him like a farm animal, squeezing out his rare magic before tossing him into the icy abyss to perish. Laughed at for being a total zero in a household packed with legendary fencing superstars. He suffered through endless torment, desperately begging for a tiny crumb of daddy's affection. His grand total payoff was a sword piecing his lungs and his brothers cackling like manic hyenas. Turns out the supposed tragic finale is just the messy prologue to something much bigger. Getting a second shot at life, he keeps the godly abilities that got him off in the first place. He is preparing to ensure his backstabbing family regrets ever inviting him to the gene pool. We start in a literal morgue, with mountains of corpses under a crimson sky and a lone survivor who clearly had a rough morning. Quiet is scattered by a voice shouting Ash, and we see a golden-haired warrior checking out his sworn. Meet Roderick, a farda who clearly skipped every parenting class, demanding to know why his kid ditched his military post. Asura is hanging by a thread, dripping blood and using his blade as a crush, but he makes his lethal intent perfectly clear. Roderick remains completely unfazed, eyeing him with glowing crimson pupils as the heady atmosphere screams certain doom. Asura refuses to budge, bracing against the Arctic gusts while challenging his father to confirm the incoming carnage. His gaze is burning with pure, distilled fury, showing he has hit his breaking point and plans to wreck the whole establishment. Roderick wears a look of pure contempt, labeling his offspring a useless prop whose only function is dying for the family brand. Behold our lead character, Asura Elmheim, who looks cool but definitely needs a lifetime of expensive therapy sessions. This is the Elmheim family crest, a fancy logo that represents nothing but pure, unadulterated garbage for our boy Astor. The Elmheims are the continent's preeminent sword nerds, led by Roderick, who radiates the terrifying aura of a final boss. He holds a record for 7 wings, making him a working deity, while we see him dwarfing the tiny, helpless Astor. Astor refused to quit, grinding until his bones groaned and fulfilling every insane order just to win some crumbs of love. Yet no matter his Herculean efforts, he always ended up eating mud with a shattered practice sword, miles behind his dad. The siblings were also delightful little nightmares, looming over him to call him winless while mocking his pathetic ambitions. He felt like an absolute failure, trapped by his inability to grow the wings required to satisfy his father's ego. In this realm, wings equal power, and since Roderick is the king of wings, our magic-free hero was basically treated as human refuse. That wingless label wasn't just a friendly nickname, it was a daily verbal assault from his kin to remind him he was trash. Despite the relentless abuse, Astor kept grinding through rain and sleet, training his muscles until they hit their absolute limit. He held on to the naive hope that enough sweat and tears would eventually earn him the recognition he craved. Jumping to the wintry battlefield, Astor is leading his troops, but the vibe is feeling incredibly suspicious. He spots a flicker in the forest, his combat intuition kicking in as he realizes they are being stalked. Then chaos erupts as arrows rain down and his squad panics, turning the trek into a chaotic snowy massacre. Plot twist. Astor glances upward only to find his dear old dad playing puppet master behind this mess, which is a pretty crummy reward for a decade of being a good little soldier. Roderick sports a facial expression chillier than a Frieza, staring at his kid like a Saudi burrito wrapper while questioning why a simple Heimer would ever dream of having feelings. The guy basically fires him on the spot and tells him to kick rocks, treating his own flesh and blood like a disposable napkin after finishing a greasy meal. Astor loses his remaining marble, charging at the old man with maximum effort and hollering his name while wildly swinging a sharp stick at him. Major oopsie. Roderick plays in the big leagues, and as things get messy, Astor realizes he was the world's biggest clown for actually trusting this dude. Plummeting through empty space, he feels like a shattered vase, roasting his own stupidity for trying to get a hug from a literal nightmare. Roderick just hangs around with a punchable smirk, seemingly getting a kick out of watching his offspring take a permanent trip to the ground. Out of nowhere, neon red sparkle ropes wrap around his throat and limbs, effectively turning him into a very sad, immobile kite being pulled down. The family reunion turns into a wrestling match where the siblings use mystical powers to bounce him off the ice like a rubber ball. Astor bellows with genuine misery, because although the physical wounds are unpleasant, being betrayed by family definitely carries a much sharper sting. The brotherly figure strolls over and delivers a boot to his noggin, mentioning that folks without flight gear are destined to be total bottom-tier players. The siblings loom above him, laughing at his attempt to wiggle through the dirt like a confused beetle, proving they are definitely not winning any sibling awards. Drenched in red while collapsed in the slush, Astor lets out a subbing inquiry, wondering why they bothered adopting him if they intended to discard him like a piece of trash. Roderick takes a knee nearby and tells him to get over himself, revealing the spicy secret that he never actually wanted a son in the first place. He yanks Astor upward by his follicles, meeting eyes that are glowing like angry lemons. Though the kid has zero chance of fighting back, the patriarch reveals the grim reality, explaining how he specifically craved the mythical avian features that were allegedly lurking within the boy's internal anatomy. Astor is completely floored, since the boy lacked any inkling about the incredible cosmic energy hiding inside his own skin since day one. The villain continues being toxic, mentioning that the boy's mother served as a handy tool for those schemes, proving he belongs in the deepest pits of the underworld. He basically confesses Astor was a science project, then wanders off to leave his kid as a human popsicle since he got the loot he wanted. Astor extends a shaky, messy mitten, begging for some context because he is definitely not prepared to close this chapter of his life just yet. Channeling a final speck of power, the boy attempts a desperate surge while hollering for the patriarch to respond, although his physical form is rapidly collapsing. His fingers go floppy in the frosty slush, as the world fades into a bright white screen and he feels like he's inside a giant freezer. The visual feed starts cutting out, and he comes to the realization that his Rotasuki existence is finally reaching the credit scene. While the snowstorm eats him alive, he has one last bummer of a thought, wondering why he even bothered participating in life for so long. The blurry church spire appears through the white nonsense, signaling that the journey of Astor Elmheim has officially hit a dead end. Plot armor activates. Astor glimpses the atmosphere while sensing some peculiar toastiness, contemplating whether he accidentally migrated into the eternal cosmos. Upon attempting a wiggle, he observes that his perspective changed, since he remains amidst the frozen powder but every object seems monstrously oversized. The guy is flabbergasted to discover that he is not in some spiritual lounge, but rather breathing in the real world after dodging his funeral. He is currently a human rug in a deep pile of white fluff, gazing at the storm while feeling totally baffled about his current situation. On attempting to hoist a limb, he spots a frightening development, as his appendage is shrunken, forcing him to question why his anatomy is so minuscule. Gaping at his meaty, miniature mitts in complete shock, he wonders if these tiny sausages actually belong to his body now. Reality strikes with the force of a wet diapo, revealing he is officially a pine-sized infant person. A thorough self-examination confirms his bizarre predicament. He is now residing in a diapoclide physical form, which feels like a very poorly written plot twist. Nearby, a woman rests permanently in the freezing powder, filling his small heart with dread as he ponders her identity and the reason for her sudden, icy end. Those amber peepers stretch wide at noises in the blizzard, as foggy recollections from his past finally start to lock together like puzzle pieces. Mounted warriors gallop through the howling blizzard, screaming frantic commands to locate that runaway female regardless of the difficult weather conditions. The squad hunts for a kidnapped toddler on behalf of the jerk Lord Roderick, a realization that makes Asta feel like he's been shoved into a freezer. Asta sits completely paralyzed by terror upon hearing that name, recognizing the brutes as his biological father's hired muscle from a previous lifetime. Glimpses of a monster-saddled Roderick horned his thoughts while he examines his microscopic fingers, unable to grasp that he has returned to his personal living hell. The truth finally registers in his brain that he has warped back through time, gaining a weird restart button at the very messy dawn of his existence. Distant orange glows from the hunting squad approach, signaling that he must crawl faster or face a game over screen before his new life even begins properly. Deciding that this nonsense can be analyzed during a future midlife crisis, he focuses entirely on the singular task of not becoming a frozen baby popsicle. Remaining in this spot means a one-way ticket back to that miserable Duke, a fate he would gladly trade for a quick death in the snow. This minuscule sprout begins an aggressive scramble through the drifts, presenting a bizarre image of a diapoclide top possessing the grit of a salty war veteran. His mental narrator is screaming for him to put as much distance as humanly possible between himself and those genetic disasters he once called relatives. He shoves against the frozen ground with his puny palms, his shiny eyes blazing with a refusal to quit this miserable icy marathon. The sub-zero temperature is agonizing while he fights for every breath, his infant lungs struggling against the wind and his own desperate crawling effort. A massive furrow stretches across the white landscape, reminding him that while his old self begged for scraps of love, he now drags his buddy forward just to stay alive. He glares forward with an expression far too intense for a newborn, swearing that he will absolutely make it out of this mess. Reaching toward the ghost of his sire, he silently promises that Roger will eventually settle his massive debt of past cruelty. Utter fatigue eventually wins as he face-splints into the powder, his puny frame completely toasted after dragging himself across an absurdly large stretch of tundra. Precisely as the world starts to fade into blackness, some fancy footwear materializes before his face, suggesting that a random passerby has stumbled upon him. The youthful maiden with flowing silver locks notices him and shouts for her dad, while the sunrise provides some cinematic lighting for the whole scene. This classy gentleman belongs to the Hefford family line, a noble viscount who appears totally flabbergasted by the sight of a solo baby in a blizzard. Lifting the vibrating little nugget, the nobleman asks the only logical thing, which involves why a fresh human would be chilling in such a desolate, frozen environment. He holds Esther with immense care, observing the small face and sensing that this particular ruckrat is definitely not just another standard issue screaming infant. He gazes deep into the newborn's eyes while feeling incredibly perplexed, simply uttering over and over that the creature he found is indeed a tiny human child. Glancing at the Trex, his mouth falls open, realizing this crumb's nature actually traveled an impossible distance without any assistance at all. Rotating his head to glimpse the snowy Trex again, he bulges his eyes because no infant should possess the physical stamina or physics-defying grit for that journey. Returning his gaze to Asta, he questions the boy's origin, certain that he is currently clutching a very unique and rare treasure. Asta hits the pillow and moves toward dreams, snugly tucked into the arms of her human with an attentive gaze. As things get real, the miniature human named Asta drifts through a pitch-black abyss, looking at his surroundings while a ginger-haired infant hovers nearby in this cosmic cradle. The red-headed neighbor extends a tiny palm and shows off some miniature teeth, likely offering a guided tour of the strange sparkly afterlife dimension. Out of the blue, a finger descends to boop his tiny nose bridge, causing him to grunt while others debate the safety of squishing the cute features. Asta blinks to find a crowd of 3 small girls with colorful hairstyles staring into his personal space, while one emits a high-frequency announcement. A silver-topped girl named Alphen hoists him high while the rest of the crew swarms his legs, making him ponder the logistics of this sudden tiny kidnapping. Getting squashed and poked by high-energy children makes him show downward facial features, transitioning from a glorious champion to a squeaky plushie for toddlers. Eventually done with a group squeeze, he exerts horizontal force to bail out, leaving the gathered children frozen like statues in the face of baby power. He makes contact with the floor and implements a four-legged sprint to buy some distance, internally questioning the cosmic script responsible for this low-level drama. A small girl with vibrant green irises leans forward with an open mouth, projecting loud sounds as a little human finishes his record-breaking floor lap. It is a full-blown toddler pursuit as he scrambles past furniture while the girls move in, all while a yellow light begins leaking out of his pores. The close-up zoom shows his eye glowing like a neon sign, proving his inner energy responds quite vigorously to the physical stresses of playground games. Without any warning, a golden deezer of force blasts from the tiles, sending baby Asta into the low orb of rafters as his new fuel tanks finally ignite. Asta behaves exactly like a tiny shiny cruise missile, drifting through the air with zero navigation skills and moving his limbs in a frantic windmill motion. His path moves downward toward a set of roof shingles, descending at high speeds while his skin shows signs of moisture from the rapid velocity. He clamps his eyes into tight slits and braces for the impact, exhibiting forehead sweat, worried that his second life is concluding via structural failure. Instead of a hard landing, a man named Hyfried catches him mid-descent, looking at the sky and remarking on the unusual meteorological forecast for falling infants. Asta peels open his eyelids to see his catcher, his pupils widening significantly as he examines the identity of the person currently acting as a soft landing. Standing straight up in the freezing white scenery, Hyfried supports the kid, officially recognized by the text as the boss of the Ladrick neighborhood. Glancing at the massive mansion nearby, Asta realizes he has arrived at yet another Elmheim residence, which really messes up his simple plan for a discreet exit. Here we see Hyfried Muelheim, the manager of this specific branch, wearing high-quality noble fabrics that conceal a very complex resume and history. This particular individual previously served as a top-tier agent, working as one of 2 primary guards for the royal palace alongside a man named Roderick. Memories of old oil paintings and stories of mass family disappearances come back to him, making the physical presence of these living people a visual surprise. He moves his hand outward to touch the air, finally accepting that his clock is reset, leaving the previous future behind for a completely fresh start. The small version of Asta holds his hand to his forehead in a gesture of failure, realizing he escaped one Elmheim only to be found by another brother. A woman titled the Viscountess accepts the delivery, asking about her attic energy flows, while Hyfried remarks that the specific infant seems slightly irregular for his size. Looking downward at him, the Viscountess pulls her mouth into a large smile, peering visually focused on the small person they rescued from the snowstorm. She provides a warm proximity and says he must have been tense, offering a level of physical support and soft words he has rarely encountered before. He peers up at her face, examining her specific behaviors, as she brushes his hair strands while he silently observes his actions for future living arrangements. Hyfried stands by with relaxed facial muscles, visually appearing to possess a much more stable disposition than the individual who previously sighed the child. Hyfried reaches out, his expression suddenly as serious as a text ordered, sensing something extraordinary about this kid. He declared that this tiny human possessed absolutely massive power. Peeling back the baby's sleeve, he revealed a glowing red mark to his wife, like a magical, high-intensity tattoo. He explained that this crest was a final, undeniable proof of Aster's future potential. Aster glanced down at his arm, his infant eyes widening like saucers, nearly popping right out of his head. He couldn't fathom how he was already exhibiting the 7-wing power while still in swaddling clothes. He stared intensely at the bright red crest on his miniature appendage, thoroughly perplexed. He had been a wingless nobody in his previous incarnation, so this new development made zero sense. His eyes narrowed with suspicion as he began connecting the pieces of the puzzle in his mind. The simmering fury from his past life instantly began boiling over once more. He experienced a sharp flashback to his final moments, recalling Roderick looming above him, admitting he simply wanted to usurp the power of the 7 wings. The pieces fell into place with a sickening thud. Roderick hadn't discarded him for being weak. He raised him purely to harvest the power. He felt more dread than ever to seek vengeance. Baby Aster, despite being in diapers, was absolutely livid, his tiny face contorted with pure rage toward Roderick. He realized the incredible nerve of his father calling him wingless while secretly planning a Loncon power theft. The Viscountess glanced down at the baby in her arms and grew slightly anxious, finding his intense facial expression rather unsettling for someone so small. Hyfried's face was shrouded in shadow, giving him a dramatic look as he gazed at the boar. He seemed completely absorbed, deep in thought as he wrestled with a significant choice. Aster looked at Hyfried, realizing this entire scenario was becoming highly risky. He started to panic about what these new people might attempt now that his incredible power had been discovered. The tiny baby Aster was internally clenching his fists, swearing that he wouldn't let his power fall into the Elmheim family's possession for a second time. He was fully ready to use this strength specifically for revenge. Hyfried delivered a completely unexpected bombshell by suggesting adoption. He looked absolutely determined to safeguard this enigmatic child and officially welcome him into their family. Aster stayed at him from the side, completely speechless and utterly taken aback. He absolutely had not foreseen that particular development. Hyfried extended his hand toward Aster, signaling that he was prepared to formally take on the responsibility of her father. He gently patted Aster's head, referring to him fondly as a fledgling unable to fly on his own just yet. The interaction was surprisingly heartwarming and tender. Hyfried stood prominently next to his wife, making a serious pledge to care for the boy until he was ready to launch himself into the world. Aster remained in his wife's arms, silently processing everything. We get a dramatic close-up on Aster's eye, showing he's completely overwhelmed by the realization that someone actually cares for him without demanding something in return. Out of nowhere, the 3 little girls from before completely lost their footing and tumbled through the doorway. It became obvious they were trying to listen in on the private conversation. Hyfried turned quickly and caught them in the act, directly asking if they had heard everything. The girls looked absolutely horrified, like they'd been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. They immediately tried to play innocent, with Alfred insisting they were simply super concerned about the new baby. Despite their fibs, they seemed genuinely happy he was staying. The entire family gathered around the new baby, creating a little crowd. One red-haired girl even pulled on her mother's dress, trying to get a better look at her new brother. The Viscountess lifted baby Aster up high, and the little orange-haired girl reached out to play with him. Aster just dangled there, probably wondering when he could finally return to his nap. She looked at him with a mixture of pride and a loving smile. She had officially become a mother again, and she truly couldn't be happier about it. Aster is held up toward the window against the backdrop of the sunset, and his new name appears in large, glowing letters for all to see. Hyfried announced that this baby was a new star born into the family, a complete 180 from his previous existence where he was treated as a complete disgrace. Time advances quickly. We see a huge, pristine white castle basking under a bright sun. A full decade has elapsed since that life-changing snowy afternoon. A slightly older, gray-haired Hyfried walks through the grounds when a servant tells him that everyone has been expecting his arrival. The carriage door opens slowly, revealing the legs of a young man as he steps gracefully onto the stone courtyard. Look at this incredible blow-up. This is 10-year-old Aster, appearing exceptionally sharp in his vest, having clearly blossomed into a strikingly handsome young man. He pivots back to the stagecoach, extending his palm to assist a lady, advising her to observe the ground, showcasing how a true Svarg gentleman behaves. The damsel is Ilfen, blossoming significantly, who flashes a radiant beam and verbalizes thanks, while a Thor cloud of tiny Aster marks how much she matured. They wander together through the path, where Ilfen unexpectedly sports a sharp saber on her leg, proving the whole tribe loves basic fantasy combat hobbies. They are traversing a fancy garden leading to a big gala, where signage confirms this event is the annual dance of sharp pointy kitchen utensils. This party remains a gigantic yearly festival for every combative household under the Elmheim flag, meant essentially for bragging about muscles and looking very menacing. we witness a tight frame on the footwear of every dueling hopeful arrived to represent the kin, suggesting this battle will be messy and highly aggressive. Asura along with Ulfin barge right inside a massive cluster of humans, causing numerous whispers as observers recognize the second-rate noble family arrived late. Bystanders in the mob are gossiping rudely, speculating how the Viscount family fished some random brat from a dish because they are biologically incapable of offspring. Multiple dark, spooky figures with glowing hellish pupils depict the judging elites, wondering exactly how much the Viscount desires to ruin the Elmheim household prestige. Astor waits before the gigantic doors of the primary property, admiring the fancy construction, thinking to himself that this is the home of that one dude. Ulfin looks quite grumpy regarding the foul remark she overhears, but Asta maintains his stoic composure and suggests she simply ignore the chirping of the peasants. Someone is squeezing their knuckles firmly, the narrative text highlighting this world's cruelty, since anyone demonstrating a trace of vulnerability gets totally flattened like pancakes. Astor and Ulfin stand firmly together, prepared to confront the masses, with Asta looking entirely unbothered by the numerous hateful eyeballs looking in his general direction. Pyfried lingers beside Asta, clarifying the current mediocre status of the bloodline, noting they serve as the designated underdogs inside this high society circus show. He pauses before the gigantic main residence, explaining to Asta his goal for the youth to experience the actual state of affairs via his optical sensors. Pyfried observes his hand-picked kid and wonders if he feels bummed out being stuck in a household that society considers to be a giant joke. Astor offers a smug, cheeky grin and clarifies it is perfectly fine being this chilly, signaling that he likely has some secret chaotic plots in development. Pyfried releases a massive belly laugh, clearly impressed by the brat's vibe, saying such brave words are remarkably comforting for a worried father like him. Astor experiences a short mental trip to his old existence, when he was face down in the mud during his introductory ball, known as a massive disappointment. He gazes at that reflection of his pathetic self with immense hubris, knowing the game has changed because those 7 holy limbs are back in style. Viewers witness an intense zoom of his sparkling golden pupil, proving he's totally focused and about to ruin everyone's carefully written historical textbooks. The trio marches toward the fancy manor together, getting themselves mentally ready to perform their big grand cinematic entrance into the pit of vipers. Within a high window, a couple of arrogant blokes observe them arriving with pure mockery, potentially serving as Astor's older siblings from his previous pathetic life. Asta looks up while wearing a sinister shade, identifying those scoundrels immediately and probably already preparing a plan for some female's total social obliteration. The group travels toward the manor portal, as a narrative cloud suggests that first, above all things, it is time for a spectacular arrival ceremony. Astor glares right at the camera with a lethal and dangerous smirk. This kid will soon blow the entire martial arts world away, and I support. Everything is staged for the Bladen's gathering. The energy is completely vibrating, with thousands waiting for royal duelists to display how absolute physical dominance functions. We observe a yellow-haired fighter taking his position, demonstrating that back when fighters ruled everything, strength was not a slogan but total bladed weapon control. A crimson-haired warrior dashes forward with amazing velocity, proving that in this current environment, your prowess with a cold eye and toothpick decides your actual worth. Viewed from elevated terraces, the arena site remains incredible, representing the absolute peak of sword fighting excellence where every swing looks like a museum display. Metallic bands fill the room louder than My Kitchen Disasters as legendary prowess straight hits, and these fellows confirm the shiny reputation is not just clever marketing. A tin container on legs zooms over stones, leaving a dust cloud like a malfunctioning smoke machine. Viewing such concentrated sweat and willpower is completely bananas. We see a moody picture of warriors bumping the dinner utensils in the center square. It behaves as though existence froze simply to witness 2 dudes get stressed. Conflict peaks with a chaotic swarm of pokes and glowing bits of fire. One participant looks severely constipated from the immense effort to bypass his rival's brick wall defenses. Success arrives finally, and the winning can hoist his sharp butter knife for the yelling masses, embodying the value of the generic metals everyone is frantically chasing. Macrovision shows a sweaty palm holding a handle covered in neon blue graffiti. Brawn matters less than how many spectral vitamins you successfully cram into your tableware. Asta, Ulfin, and Elder Hyfried watch the ruckus from the fancy balcony above, while the veteran grumbles that even after decades, this loud pit creates sensory overload. Ulfin and her kin look bored enough to hibernate right now. She mumbles it is no shock the sensible siblings skip this junk heap because the vibe is rancid. Astor glares at the combat zone with the warmth of an icy popsicle, while behind him, spectral bowls from his previous existence remind us why he is moody. Horrible memories flood back like a basement leak, showing him face-planting on these towels, while everyone heckled his misery, adding to his stash of emotional baggage. Ulfin spots his glitchy behavior and asks if he is about to vomit from fear. She actually seems concerned about him, which is a weirdly pleasant plot twist. They lean against the railings like discarded laundry while surveying the crowd. Ulfin notes that first-timers at the steel-swinging gala usually end up feeling like quivering strawberry gelatin. Asta flashes her a grin that would probably terrify a great white shark. He insists he is not trembling. He just feels a foul mix of nostalgia and disgust. Ulfin gives him a face full of utter confusion. She fails to understand his internal bloom, but that is simply our time-traveling hero being his usual dramatic self. Pyfried tells the youngsters he has generic adult business to attend elsewhere, so he pats Asta, tasking him with the difficult chore of supervising Ulfin. Ulfin throws a minor fit about being the elder, more honest sibling in the pair. Asta snickers, claiming she needs a chaperone for her clumsiness, which gets her fuming. Pyfried whacks Astor's back once more, suggesting they spend time networking and making awkward talk. The attempt stood fatherhood while unaware of the impending social train wreck. He draws close to whisper a potentially life-altering warning. He demands absolute silence regarding those 7 wings, as the risk level just skyrocketed for everyone involved. The grown-up marches off, leaving the teenagers to fend for themselves. Astor moans internally, realizing that staying anonymous is nearly impossible in this room full of nosy jerks. We see many snooty rich people whispering while staring with glowing red eyes, and the tangible malice in the air is thick enough to slice and fry. Astor scratches his scalp, feeling the immense social strain. He assumes making friends is pretty difficult when the atmosphere feels like an invitation to a stabbing. Observe the dramatic close-up of his multicolored eyeball. He spotted a specific target in the crowd, and his revenge radar is definitely beeping at maximum volume. He stomps away without offering any verbal clues, causing Ulfin to scream after him. The men need to know where his stupid feet are taking him this time. He fails to glance back, only shouting that he intends to meet some new acquaintances. We know exactly that his type of meeting usually involves a lot of bruising. Look at these trust fund babies lounging on a plush velvet sofa from above. One ginger-haired idiot laughs like a dying hyena while his minions act like cheerleaders. Astor approaches the pack and stays motionless like a creepy lawn ornament. The redhead looks up with pure annoyance, demanding to know what the intruder wants. Astor offers a totally fake greeting, stating it is wonderful to meet you, brother Dollies. He is currently working straight into a den of grumpy lions. He presents himself as Astor Af Elmheim, clarifying that he is actually the younger sibling. He maintains a polite yet lethal smile that suggests he might bite. Dolly scrutinizes him with immense paranoia and doubt. Astor explains he saw them from far away and wanted to introduce himself, though the tension is quite suffocating. Psychic leans over, blabbing to Dollies that this is simply the random stray child the victims found. Dollies reclines further, observing Astor as if he were literal garbage. Dollies chuckles until his lungs ache, insulting Astor for daring to bathe the Elmheim lineage with such gall, because this clown is literally begging for a knuckle sandwich. Memories of her grim former existence flood Astor, uncovering that Dollies and Gryan are the official successors who quite literally ended his heartbeat in that timeline. Returning to reality, Illumination finds the greasy pack, while Astor reflects that they look like toddlers in costumes after his extensive global travels. Glancing downward at the bunch, he muses over the sadness of his old habit of fearing these particular nobodies who are honestly just pathetic. The zoomed-in view of Astor's amber gaze reveals total outward serenity, yet it is obvious he is hunting for the ideal opening to pounce. Alphen arrives in a rush to seize Astor's arm, tugging him towards the exit while suggesting that greetings are finished and their departure is overdue. Noticing Alphen, Dollies beckons her with a repulsive smirk, causing the lady to freeze in pure dread as her joints vibrate under his gaze. Starting his insults, he asks if they still hide in their death's shadow, ordering them to sit down because he certainly isn't playing nice. In shamed silence, Alphen looks sideways, but Dollies insists her compliance is legally necessary since he represents the upper household over her lower branch. Alphen finally locates her courage and says no with great force, reminding him they aren't bound by servant rules, looking like a total legend. Dollies remains apathetic, pouncing to grab Alphen's wrist during her attempted departure, snarling that his monologue isn't over yet, as Astor washes with narrow eyes, clamping down with painful pressure on her skin. This trashy individual provokes a reaction as Astor's fingers begin a subtle rhythmic spasm, partially obscured by darkness. Astor looks ready to commit a crime, having reached his limit and planning to set this whole social circle ablaze. Cackling like a deranged hyena, Dolly suggests sharing a secret before dragging Alphen's dad through the mud as a failed guardian of the crown. Mentioning the source domestic scandal, he speaks of Highfried's amputation at his brother's hands, essentially sticking a jagged blade into Alphen's emotional core. Utterly destroyed by the words, Alphen monitors the floor through a veil of tears, robbed of any comeback to save her parents' honor. The insults continue as Dolly celebrates his lack of failure in genetics, proving he is truly just a mobile container for rotting kitchen scraps. Finally losing her cool, Alphen bellows her retraction at maximum volume, trembling with fury while Dolly finds her emotional fire quite hilarious. Rising from his seat, he hurls his full doublet of crimson beverage into Alphen's face, leaving her stunned as the sticky stuff flows downward. Verbal abuse persists as he labels her a zero from a void family with no inheritance, adding that her father's regret must be immense. Brandishing his vacated stem well like a maniac, he suggests she adorn herself in Bartyman rags, seeing as she will inevitably become even filthier. Supping wet and shaking in her red-stained misery, Alphen is a portrait of sorrow, though Astor remains stationed directly at her rear flank. Staring at the couch crowd, Astor reflects on his prior anxiety with a return to his standard icy and unflappable personality state. The concern existed that his rage had vanished despite the familiar mugs, but apparently that emotional void has been filled quite successfully. An assistant nearby grips a fresh bottle of fruit nectar, and Astor's vision fixates on the container, making the impending carnage very predictable. Placing a palm on Alphen to steady her nerves, he meets her shocked gaze while feeling a sense of internal gratitude for this situation. Elevating the bottle high with a masked expression, he hollers for Dollies, signaling everyone that the proverbial hammer is about to drop hard. Tilting his head from the settee, Dollies is baffled by Astor's antics, completely oblivious to the incoming wave of divine beverage-based justice. And empty out, Astor cascades the liquid contents onto Dolly's dome with expert precision, remarking that they are all still total human landfill, completely soaked and shrieking because of the steam liquid in his sights and throat. Dolly's looks hilarious, offering the most joy seen all day. One tall person stands above a vibrating figure near a piece of upholstery while gripping a hollow container. The individual on the couch makes loud seagull noises towards his kin, though he stays frozen in his spot. He places a wet finger with purple liquid to his mouth and displays a facial expression as blank as a brick wall. He remarks that the contents are simply fruit juice for children. He meets the other man's pupils with his lips curled slightly upward into a rigid shape. He notes that the liquid matches a person wearing fancy thread count clothing perfectly, suggesting a massive error was made. A scene from many moons ago shows a guy in a cape struggling with a big round ball of golden radiance. He shouts toward the boy to keep the bright show contained within himself. The older man positions his frame in front of several women in dresses who are wide-eyed. He hollers at the youth, questioning if the boy intends to accidentally vaporize his own relatives with that glow. Look at those large beads of water on his head. He is barely remaining in an upright position. He commands the boy to focus because the ambient pressure from the child's light is becoming visible. Yellow energy fills the room like a glitter tornado, confirming a legendary 7-part design is present. The man stares because it is rare for a small human to hold that many megawatts of power. He maintains his footing like a stubborn mule in a storm. He speculates whether a typical physical frame can safely manage that much or golden voltage without breaking apart. Nearby stands the small boy, featuring eyeballs that shine like twin golden flashlights. He informs the guardian that the energy flow will be managed by both of the hands together. A soldier with a face as pale as a fresh sheet enters the stone chamber at a high speed. Pie Fried asks why he is running as if his pants were currently on fire. A group of seated men in robes fix their gaze on the man in armor. Pie Fried scowls since they are currently in the middle of a very fancy talk about resources. The word arrives that 2 descendants from different family lineages are having an intense metal stick party together. The nearby officials look like stone statues with their mouths wide open at the information. We see one guy with big dinner plate eyes and another looking like a stationary ice cube. The calm one maintains his posture without a single twitch of her facial muscle. He does not wait for a carriage and instead exits the chamber at full sprint. He hears a woman's vocalizations echoing off the stone walls as he runs down the carpeted passage. She catches up to him while huffing and puffing like a steam engine. She asks for a verbal update on how this weapon clashing situation started in the arena. They reach the stone ledge over the sand pit where a beefy guy sits watching the show. He shows a wide-toothy grin at the sight of the siblings using metal objects on each other. Down on the dirt, the two boys are ready to play tag with swords in their hands. People in the stands whisper near each other that this is a rare circus to witness. His palms squeeze the iron railing until his knuckles look as white as chalk. A man with a thick beard mentions that the ending of this fight will shift the social hierarchy. A rich guy nearby is leaking water from his forehead while observing the action. He notes that a win for the branch house would create a giant social storm for everyone nearby. The broad-framed lord watches the friction with keen focus from his seat. He knows this formal sword meeting is about to become an unorganized scramble for everyone involved in the arena. One guy acts like he has a trophy already, pointing his medal at Astor's chest. He mentions that the boy is of a lower tier due to his lack of a proper lineage. He lifts his weapon sky high, and it starts glowing like a bright blue neon sign. Folks nearby inhale sharply at the sight of a four-piece tattoo glowing brightly on his limb. He wears a grin similar to a sour lemon and asks the boy to reveal his own skin markings. He expects the small kid to experience a very public moment of failure soon. Astor has a face as still as a stone wall, not even moving while the blue disco light flashes. He critiques the man for being so happy with simple geometry drawn on his skin. Look at those intense laser pupils Astor is displaying during the conversation. He says that showing off a flashlight like that is a shameful habit he would personally never stoop to. The person's face turns into a big red beet while he holds his sword firmly. He speaks quite loudly because nobody has ever critiqued his habits or expensive status in such a way before. If the small kid wins, the other guy must say he's sorry to the girl. But if the big guy wins, Astor lives his days as a pet human. He lunges with an overhead metal strike, making a loud noise like a wounded bear. He concentrates every pound of his weight into that initial descent of the sharp object. With a big metal clang, he stuffs the weapon with one hand while sparks fly like a welder. He does not even budge a single millimeter from his original position. Astor pushes the metal away and moves past the guy like slippery butter on a hot pan. One swings at empty oxygen while the boy remains in perfect physical balance nearby. That spicy Dallas kid persists, cranking up his quadruple bird sticker while cherry-flavored energy erupts outward, ensuring he means business now. Twirling his toothpick to construct a tangled mess of crimson glitter, he mimics a grumpy sentient hurricane destined for home demolition, sending a stampede of strawberry shockwaves toward Astor. It appears quite messy, yet Astor remains rooted like a very stubborn tree. Althon observes the chaos from above with intense dread, witnessing the magical spamming while fearing for the safety of her sibling. That beefy noble assesses the struggle through judgmental spectacles, noting that despite the raw juice, Dallas handles blades like a toddler with crayons. Persistently hacking away with neon glow effects. The text notes this flashy display remains a major perk of those fancy high-grade butterfly stamps. Brief math reveals that single wings are T-lights while quad sets resemble dynamite, meaning Astor is essentially hacking Everest in flip-flops. Moving like a caffeinated hummingbird, he tosses fireworks in Astor's direction, hoping sheer magical thuggery will eventually crack the guy's shield. Chuckling like a total loon, he wonders why the swagger vanished, assuming high ground because the youngster is currently busy playing defense. Eating punches like snacks, Astor's weapon drinks the heat while he casually asks if the verbal diarrhea stage of the fight ended. With shadows in his gaze, he informs the yappa that his tongue wags incessantly, choosing to finally wrap up this pathetic nursery game. Deploying one enormous cheddar-colored slice, he deletes the opponent's cherry mist, trashing the top-tier special move like used holiday gift wrap. Clad in bright mustard fires, he looks like a deity of brawling, causing the Coliseum vibes to flip from casual to heavy. Tipping forward like a static shock, he remembers nursing a decade-long grudge against these freaks, finally tasting that sweet, long-simmered vengeance today. Swinging sideways with heady intent and glittering trails, he forces dollies into a frantic, clumsy parry that barely saves his puny neck. Astor finally hits his maximum salt capacity, staring down dollies with those scary flashlight pupils to remind him that he yaps incessantly. Launching a beefy crosscut that leaves shimmering trails, he smashes into dollies, making him slide backward across the pavement like an unlucky hockey puck, planting his feet inside a mustard-colored energy blender. He appears fresh as a daisy, while everyone else looks like they ran marathons. Taking flight like a rocket, he reflects on 10 years of brewing hatred, ready to unleash payback on the horrors from his former life. Witness the intense concentration as he leans into a vertical slam, yellow pupils searing in while his steel blows like a supernova. Suddenly, Astor smashes his weapon, sparking a sun-sized boom right in front of dollies, who hunches over, whining against the heavy atmospheric weight, collapsing into a semi-kneel while tasting iron. The guy gasps for air, reaching that point of the battle where everything looks doomed. Little bro Ryan stares with an open mouth, unable to process how his seemingly immortal sibling is currently receiving an involuntary remedial lesson. Forcing his blade against the other, the honey-colored ore devours a red sparkle, flattening Dolly's both body and soul under the sheer force. Freaking out internally, he stammers about his quadruple wing status like a holy prayer, even though titles do not stop him from getting wrecked. Looking down with searchlight peepers, Astor emits that scary final boss aura, essentially scaring the daylights out of poor, chicken little dealies. The boom, Astor triggers a finching yellow pulse that eats dealies across the room, with a sound wave that rattles the entire kingdom. Crickets occupy the stands, the audience stunned while watching the primary bloodline egg get thoroughly folded by random addition to the family. Remaining amidst an ember inferno, he appears monstrous, signaling to the snooty aristocrats that the Elmheim roster has a scary new MVP now. Observing from higher ground, Pyfried adopts a serious mug, where the flexing this hard invites every local assassin to sample the Astor menu. Dealies hugs the dirt like a terrified potato, realizing his face has become a map of fright. He finally understands reality, mainly that he is basically the buffet snack now. Astor recalls a spicy memory of those two goons giggling during his funeral practice in a past life. That old trauma is now the premium high-octane gasoline for his current fury. Returning to now, our hero resembles a very grumpy retribution demon, clad in shiny dark sparkles. His vibe is so chunky the floor is literally splitting from the pressure. Dealey starts auditioning for a role as a puddle, begging through his tears for mercy. He has basically achieved peak social embarrassment while weeping in front of the entire audience. From her high perch, Elfin shrieks for him to chill before he does something legally irreversible. She sees him approaching the edge of no return and tries to reboot his brain. The colossal boom of emo energy rattles the stadium as Asta vents his bad mood. The wind is so aggressive it almost sends a fancy folks over the edge. That buff Duke jumps up, wearing a look of total fanboy excitement. He completely ignores a public relations nightmare, simply thrilled by the sight of scary, or power. Asta looms over the human gel on the towel, advising him that future beatdowns require wearing old rags. That way, he won't cry about his designer laundry getting all damp. The loser just subs softly in the mud, emotionally and physically turned to compost. Asta's savage verbal burns actually hurt more than the literal sword cuts to his face. Our main guy peers toward the seats above, wearing a look that could freeze a volcano. He has settled his current tab, yet he knows the party's just starting. He hides his toothpick back in its scabbard and ignores the stunned audience entirely. Their opinions mean nothing to him, since he is busy playing intergalactic chess while they play checkers. Alfred hangs over the ledge, booting for her bra with a grin that could blind someone. Asta decides internally that his identity is a flightless nobody has officially expired today. He flashes a subtle, cocky little smile while strolling toward the exit. He has successfully demonstrated that he is no longer the favorite punching bag of his previous existence. Out of nowhere, his glowing peepers expand as he feels a spooky shiver crawl up his back. He detects a heady aura that makes his recent duel look like toddlers playing tag. A spooky red and black gloom starts choking the life out of the room, making oxygen a luxury. This vibe reeks of a level 99 antagonist entering the chat. Asta starts leaking nervous fluids while staring intently toward the fancy steps. He figures out precisely which VIP just crushed the event and his heart starts thumping wildly. Up there stands the man of the hour, Lord Roderick, looking incredibly grumpy in his thick red mist. He glares at Asta with glowing lights and the crowd shuts up instantly. Asta locks eyes with a specific individual who gave him an early funeral in his prior run. The true monster of his dreams has finally made a live appearance. The audience is collectively having a meltdown after that spectacle. Everyone is shocked that some random branch family kid just cleaned the floor with the main lineage heir. Look at those hefty stompers making their way onto the sand, pranking up the tension. His success has caused a real mess, and this old dude hates seeing the family name slandered. Asta glances up, knowing he's in for a very rough workout today. The scary gentleman looming nearby is the absolute mountain who runs the main Elmheim household. Dallas looks like a broken toy on the pavement, leaking cherry syrup and feeling conflicted. He is happy his pops arrived to save him, but scared of the inevitable lecture later. It is the ultimate small fry against a giant as Asta faces off with Big Roderick. The strength difference is obvious, seeing as the stone tiles are literally screaming under the weight. Say hello to the head honcho, Roderick, sporting that snowy facial hair and icy stare. He emits the sword of energy typically reserved for the end of a long video game. Asta is sweating enough to fill a bucket, partially hidden in a spooky glow. He realizes a simple mistake now will make this reincarnation much shorter than his previous attempt. The description formally identifies him as Roderick Elmheim as he glides toward the center. This gentleman does not merely work, he physically colonizes every square inch of air around him. Dolly starts gesturing at our hero like a playground tattletale, yelling for his daddy. He's working overtime to pass the blame bucket so he won't get grounded for failing. He launches into a full tantrum, labeling Asta a dirty hybrid for daring to backtrack the main elites. This fellow seriously possesses zero modesty after getting his hide tanned. Roderick's peepers beam with intense dislike as he stares down at his failure offspring. He orders the boy to flex on Asta, although his face says he expected way better. Following a deafening crunch, the palm meets the rock hard enough to trigger an earthquake. Roderick isn't actually targeting the main character, he is just disciplining his own son. Forget gentle parenting, Roderick basically turned Dolly's fingers into fertilizer with a brutal slam. The main heir is currently auditioning for a horror movie with those painful screams. Everyone watching is totally traumatized, and honestly, can you blame them, given Dolly's is having a catastrophic afternoon while his old man offers zero emotional support. Roderick looms over his kid with a sharp blade out, basically playing the role of an angry god. He asks if the boy understands he just ruined the family reputation. Pyfried is screaming from the cheap seats, praying that Roderick chills with the violence. Even for warriors, this is extra, and the Viscount looks like he smells garbage. Roderick ignores the haters on the balcony. He readies his boot to mash the leftover hand bits, telling the kid that losers don't get the privilege of weaponry. Out of nowhere, a bolt of azure light flies across the frame, suggesting someone is either extremely courageous or has a death wish to interrupt Roderick. There is a quick close-up of the mess, showing Roderick's crimson eye widening in shock. He definitely did not have interrupters on his schedule for today. Asta has officially joined the party. He successfully parried that stomp with his blade, shielding the same jerk who was aiming for his head moments ago. Roderick is totally confused, demanding to know what the boy is playing at. Asta retorts immediately, noting that his dear cousin still owes the other kid a big apology. Asta blares at his real dad, calling him uncle with massive balls. He wonders if Roderick can pause the murdering long enough for Dolly's to say he is sorry. Roderick is insulted that this tiny orphan is talking back to him. He asks if getting adopted by the side family somehow tricked Asta into feeling legitimate. Asta snaps back that he is the loyal son of his father. He informs the angry lord that blood doesn't matter when you have a better teacher and integrity. Roderick remains motionless, giving the boy a blade that would normally vaporize a human being. The vibes are currently so heavy you could slice them with scissors. Roderick begins leaking a terrifying crimson energy that covers the page. He warns Asta that as a member of the side squad, he should get ready for a fight. The buff dude on the upper floor is enjoying the show with a smile. He mentions that Roderick commands huge armies, meaning Asta is essentially juggling grenades here. The gentleman with the facial hair is nervous, seeing this is no longer a sandbox fight. This is quickly turning into a nightmare for the history books. The blue-haired fellow is relaxing, treating this like prime cinema. He recalls the nasty past, reminding everyone that Pyfried already paid an arm as a tax for rebellion. Pyfried remains on the deck looking super worried. He is well aware of Roderick's demonic potential, and he is genuinely scared for the safety of his kid. Roderick aims his sharp tip directly at the neck, radiating pure murderous intent. He asks Aster exactly how much he is willing to lose for this hero act. Take a look at that shot of the kid's face. He isn't trembling. He begins his response with formal politeness, signaling that he's about to deliver a sick burn. Aster clarifies that this event was a proper duel which he won fairly. He tells the scary man he was simply responding to disrespect exactly like a warrior should. Roderick appears seconds away from a massive tantrum. He's clenching his jaw while his eyes glow bright red because he hates being told what to do. Aster wraps up his monologue by reusing the Lord's own logic against him. He states firmly that he has no plans to lose any appendages during this standoff. Althan is hanging onto the banister, looking close to cardiac arrest. The hairy guy behind her is making sure she doesn't drop while things get incredibly stressful. The dude with the blue lux is cracking up. He finds it hilarious that a 10-year-old is trash-talking the scariest boss in the whole kingdom. The bloody fuck surrounding Roderick is going insane. He is definitely weighing the pros and cons of deleting Aster from existence right on the spot. Roderick eventually mumbles something about understanding and drops his guard slightly. For a brief moment, it seems like he might give the boy a break. Just kidding. Roderick speeds up so fast he disappears. Aster's eyes pop when he realizes his reaction time is too slow. The final boss has initiated a cumber. Seal zips by Aster's forehead at lightning speed. If his stance had shifted even slightly, you would currently be -1 head and lying flat on the ground. Roderick drops a giant shockwave that literally cuts the floor in half. The level of overkill involved here is honestly just impressive and totally unhinged. Ulfin is shouting with high volume, palms pressed to facial skin, observing the ground where a red liquid has recently splattered across the stone. Pyfried repeats a name at high decibels, bending his center of gravity far over the balcony edge toward a circular indent in the earth. Roderick stands amidst grey vapor without moving, while Hyfried travels through the air after departing from the elevated platform at great speed. Two men collide while high above the ground, yellow sparks appearing as Hyfried uses his forearms to deflect an incoming metallic tool. It pushes dust outward in a circle, as Hyfried holds a small frame behind him while Roderick stands still without changing his position. Pyfried speaks loudly to the small person nearby, checking for physical integrity, noting the young individual is positioned behind a tall barding. A metal blade rests vertically inside the cracked floor, while Roderick moves his legs in the opposite direction without turning his neck back. Pyfried rotates his head with an open jaw, noting the deep indentation in the stone caused by the single downward swing of the metal. Aster remains upright within the shattered architecture, gripping his sword handle firmly despite the various dark marks present on his outer clothing. Close footage reveals Aster features red stains and soil, a singular yellow eye emitting a bright light while his feet remain firmly planted. Roderick shifts his eyes toward his rear shoulder briefly during his exit, as Aster stands within the direct line of sight of the traveler. A man in a lawn cape moves forward through rubble, leaving footprints in the dirt as other people gather around a seated figure. Aster lowers his right limb as his speed decreases, then Hyfried extends his arms to stabilize the boy who looks toward the ground. Aster leans forward into the larger man, as the older figure moves his jaw to articulate the youth's name with wide, visible eyes. Aster displays teeth while red liquid covers his lower face, looking up to say phrases about a female individual who remains nearby. Pyfried observes Aster with steady eyes, speaking to the small boy about his actions in the arena while placing a hand nearby. Roderick exits the large oval space followed by dollies, as onlookers observe from the highest seating areas located around the wide perimeter. A man with blue hair gestures toward Roderick, using words to describe current events, as others in expensive clothing watch the exit. Dollies moves away on the floor as if being towed, while the narrator mentions the possibility of Aster ending the interaction much sooner. A specific image shows Aster standing opposite Roderick, with the text identifying him as a person making a visible stand in public. Two men with facial hair stand together talking about the event, noting how Aster used significant physical force to enter the gathering. Roderick looks toward the large stone structure with a neutral face, observing current atmospheric changes and potential shifts in the weather ahead. Ulfen runs quickly to place her arms around Aster while Hyfried watches, showing the trio standing together in the open arena space. Sunlight strikes wooden objects hitting each other, creating rhythmic sounds early in the morning at a large estate where several people move. Men in armor stand on a high vantage point, looking down with wide eyes at the physical activity occurring on the grass below. Aster swings a long wooden tool, causing another trainee to leave the ground and travel backwards through the air from the force. The person lies flat on the grass with upcurved lips, peering to observe the impact he just experienced from the wooden training tool. Sunlight highlights a standing youth near the center of the lawn, who maintains an upright posture after the social gathering concluded recently. Uniformed men discuss the movements of the 10-year-old, noting his frequent use of weapons in the yard since returning from the assembly. Information spreads regarding the interaction with the son of a lord, as many people within the house maintain a very high volume. Those top-tier snubs have spent ages bossing folks around, so Aster bagging a victory feels like a cool breeze on a humid summer afternoon. Aster remains surprisingly humble despite the hype, darting around the training area like a caffeinated ninja who refuses to settle for simple assembly points. He hammers his muscles to silence the haters who dared mock the Viscount, testing his sleek new physical limits to find every hidden spark of energy. Engaging a frantic instructor with terrifying focus, he desires more than a mere sparring match as he tries to break his own maximum capacity record. His knuckles turn white as he accepts he cannot touch Roderick yet, the shimmering amber eye radiating a desperate craving for a massive power upgrade. Throwing his weight into a thunderous strike, he realizes a crest is merely a shiny badge of talent that is useless without the skills to wield it. Shadows of a crimson void haunt his mind where he continues to tumble, sensing the legendary prowess of the seven wings slipping through his fingers. Gifted spells or not, or magic serves no purpose without discipline, and he fears the inner storm might consume him before he tames the tempest. A sharp crack signals the death of his timber weapon as it shatters, which is honestly quite the destructive feat for a scrawny 10-year-old. Kneeling amidst the debris of his training gear, he notes that ordinary wooden sticks simply cannot withstand his aggressive attempt to become a legendary beast. Such stubborn focus is impressive, since he vows to keep grinding until he can actually stare down the literal monsters from the main household. Demanding a fresh victim from the sidelines, he looms over a mountain of splinters like a miniature disaster zone roaming the campus grounds today. Unconscious bodies are scattered across the grass because they foolishly challenged him, proving that Aster skipped the day they taught lessons about holding back. Pausing his footsteps draw near, his vibrant eyes focus instantly, showing that he looks incredibly refreshed despite having just walloped a small army of soldiers. Alphen arrives looking sharp in her sleek obsidian workout outfit, mentioning that the boss man wants to have a little chat with him. Glancing at the heap of snoring casualties with a shrug, he promises to show up since obeying the Viscount is basically his primary hobby. However, he does a comical double take while checking her out, acting as if she just appeared from thin air wearing something utterly bizarre. She actually looks quite stylish in her combat threads, even though a faint blush shows she feels a bit awkward about his intense staring. He mentions how unusual this is since he typically despises tight training gear, suggesting that maybe she has finally decided to embrace the sweaty grind. Admitting that harmony is vital, he explains that watching his brutal work ethic convinced her that sitting on the bleachers was no longer an option. Suddenly, Alphen jabs her wooden tip directly toward his face, catching the poor lad completely by surprise with her aggressive and unexpected invitation to dance. Wearing a sly grin, she promises that upon her return from her quest, he better be ready to spend many miserable hours sweating alongside her. He offers a truly gentle beam in return, marking a peaceful departure from his usual habit of plotting how to ruin his many diverse enemies. Chuckling as she retreats, he begs her for a bit of mercy while the arena finally settles down aside from the moaning of injured men. Entering the house, he taps softly on a heavy timber entrance, instantly swapping his violent combat instincts for his polished aristocratic manners once again. Stepping into the office with perfect etiquette, he reports for duty while spotting his old man perched behind a desk larger than a compact car. The patriarch looks up with a somber stare and gestures for him to sit, signaling that they probably are not going to chat about the weather. Sinking into a posh couch with upright form, he ponders what urgent business forced his dad to interrupt a perfectly good round of bone-breaking. Piefried mentions that a full decade has passed since they adopted him, flipping into a sepia memory trip which usually predicts some massive plot bombshell. Leaning in, he explains that he originally planned to hold this torque until the boy aged a bit more, but current chaotic events forced his hand, drawing forth a tiny azure cushion bearing a gorgeous scarlet circlet. Aster glares at the object as though it might detonate, inquiry written all over his face. The father drops the news nugget, explaining how the shiny trinket confirms the future leader, thereby naming the boy his legitimate successor on the spot. The kid stands completely stunned, pupils dilating wildly when the old man bluntly declares his desire for the youngster to inherit the family estate. Being brutally honest, the father describes his shaky status, emphasizing the requirement for a capable replacement to prevent the lineage from crumbling into dust. Staring across their sunset-lit lens, the patriarch notes they remain an offshoot carrying a heady surname, obligated to defend their subjects whether ready or not. He states they cannot let the position of future master remain vacant indefinitely, particularly with the primary relatives constantly breathing down their collective necks. Appearing concerned, the lad queries if his siblings agree with his plan, sensing that prioritizing a fostered boy over actual kin sparks massive conflict. Releasing a deep breath, the man promises a formal announcement later, fully aware the news will be a hard pill for the household to swallow. Deep in contemplation about siblings named Marfa and Kudo, the youth suspects they will find the recent revelation quite unpleasant to their aristocratic ears. Chortling nervously, he predicts they will lack enthusiasm, specifically fretting over the high-strung sister named Kudo who likely eats nails for breakfast regularly. The father reveals that Kudo loathes the boy purely for his gender, regardless of his divine gifts, highlighting some serious domestic dysfunction and jealousy. Clutching his pants while lowering his head, the student declares his inability to comply, honestly feeling unready for such a heavy, metaphorical burden of leadership. Internally chastising himself, he recalls failing his mystical control and almost deleting Alphen, confirming he lacks the maturity required for these grand duties. Silence descends while the pay basks in golden rays, leaving the father to conclude that rational debate rarely works against a fuming, stubborn sibling. Printing gently at his ward, the master confesses he often questions the identity of the boy, who behaves with far more wisdom than normal children. The youngster rises to depart, though the guardian signals him to remain seated, mentioning a secondary item that requires immediate, careful inspection. Grasping an elongated timber container, the man posits that while the jewel seemed decent, this alternative might actually tickle the boy's tactical fancy better. Placing the mystery package onto the furniture, the youth edges closer, wondering what could possibly top inheriting an entire noble territory and prestigious title. Those amber orbs practically pop out of the kid's skull, for the contents of the chest are clearly something outside his wildly imaginative expectations. Behold the mystical swordbram, a fabled Marn reading edge which serves as the sole anchor for his angelic gifts, essentially giving him a massive cheat code. Navigating through the foliage, the adult locates a lonely clearing safe from eavesdroppers, deeming the tranquil grove ideal for the upcoming top secret equipment reveal. Feeling baffled, the learner questions their avoidance of the gymnasium, but his mentor remains grave, stating that extreme safety measures are mandatory for this toy. The father recalls the student's habit of accidental demolition, specifically visualizing a past event where the hero vaporized a sturdy masonry barrier with ease. Offering a strange handle, he presents the enchanted swordram, which usually remains the exclusive property of firstborn heirs, but is now on loan to him. The noble grips the mechanism firmly, preparing a demonstration of its capabilities, while the wide-eyed observer focuses intently on the forthcoming show of force. Looking completely dumbfounded, the lad catches sight of the device, noticing an extremely glaring absence of actual steel where it really matters for combat. The superior confirms the boy's doubt, revealing that the weapon possesses zero physical edges, appearing mostly like a decorative handle studded with glittering carnelian stones. Abruptly surging crimson energy into the grip, the titanic column of radiance pieces the clouds, nearly knocking the student flat from the sudden atmospheric turbulence. A sharp, ruby-colored edge of overpower forms, as the elder clarifies it is a construct that morphs to mirror the user's hidden inner potential. Executing a single mighty slice, the man discharges a catastrophic tide of scarlet force, literally obliterating everything within range with absolutely absurd, overwhelming destructive potential. That shockwave carves a massive circular scar through the woods, leveling ancient timber like they were mere toothpicks, which is basically a world-class flex of pure brute force. Piefried kills the power and looks totally wiped, warning Asta that this blade drains anyone with average mana. Then he panningly asks if the lad wants a go. Asta steps forward with resolve, grabbing that legendary handle, finally ready to see how his 7-wing potential handles a proper conduit for his ridiculous Marner. The boy grips the hilt with both mitts, bracing for the inevitable lightning strike, looking about as nervous as a turkey in November but clearly eager to push his limits. Asta funnels golden Marner into the sword and gets an instant, intense reaction as a swirling vortex of shimmering energy starts dancing around him like a caffeinated tornado. Asta struggles to keep his grip as the hilt starts vacuuming mana straight out of his soul, erupting in a golden light display that makes his dad look like a glowstick. A massive pillar of liquid gold shoots toward the heavens, visible for leagues, causing nearby soldiers to halt their duties and bark at the sky like they saw a flying cow. The guards are losing their marbles, debating if a meteor hit the woods, until one genius shouts that the light actually blasted upward from the dirt into the clouds. As the soldiers bicker over what that beam implies, Alfred just chills nearby, eyeing the horizon with the smug look of someone who already knows exactly who is causing trouble. Alfred glances at the distant forest and sighs, correctly guessing Asta is once again wreaking havoc, though she is frankly getting used to her brother doing the impossible. Back in the clearing, Asta is slumped on the grass but holding the hilt tight, while Hyfried looms above, admitting that this sword really is a great artifact. Hyfried looks down at his son with equal parts pride and concern, noting that while the blade is fancy, the real miracle is Asta's own overflowing well of power. A vision of a blue vortex ripples in the sky, symbolizing the insane potential Asta hides, and Hyfried realizes he is basically raising a working disaster in the making. A zoom on Asta's glowing golden eye reveals his fatigue, while Hyfried mutters that no one in their entire lineage has ever rocked the seven-wing crest before today. Turning his back to the kid, Hyfried stares at the trees, predicting that Asta will eventually eclipse both himself and Lord Roderick because legends aren't born, they're trained. A flash of future Asta squaring off against that nasty villain Roderick burns into the mind, confirming for Hyfried that the boy is working straight toward a violent destiny. Clinging to his own blade, Hyfried warns that such immense power acts like a beacon for Dronzer, telling Asta that revealing those 7 wings would flip the world upside down. As golden wings manifest on Asta's back, Hyfried explains that everyone will either worship him like a god or despise him for having the ultimate Kazu cheat code. A creepy vision shows shadowy, clawed hands reaching for young Asta, leading Hyfried to explain that bottom feeders will definitely try to exploit his talent for their own gain. With a jagged dagger lurking in the gloom, Hyfried skips the fluff and says people will surely try to shank the kid just to remove a potential headache from society. Hyfried extends a hand to Asta with a serious expression, hoping to harden the boy enough that he never experiences a bitter regret of having no power to protect himself. He urges the lad to sharpen his skills while he still has the chance, as Hyfried does his best to armor his son against the storm of trouble headed their way. Asta grabs his dad's hand with fierce determination, swearing internally that he will never settle for another pathetic life like the dumpster fire he experienced in his past. Standing tall, Asta thanks his old man and promises to master both his wings and this magical blade, now fully locked into his journey to become a total boss. 3 days vanish into thin air, and we are back at the family mansion where Hyfried and the crew stand by the front door to greet 2 new arrivals. 2 women strut into the hall, and the redhead shouts that the useless Kudryakar has returned, confirming it is Sister Kudo acting like a hyperactive tornado of energy. We get a zoom-in shot of Kudo smirking at everyone, looking like she is definitely about to cause some massive, unnecessary drama for the whole household to deal with. Kudo throws her arms open with a massive grin, chatting for her adorable little sisters while demanding that everyone drop what they are doing for a reunion group hug. The younger sisters totally ignore Kudo to tackle the white-haired Sister Malphar instead, leaving poor Kudo standing there with her arms out looking like a confused mime. Kudo remains stranded in the middle of the room looking absolutely devastated, silently wondering why nobody cares about her desperate need for some sisterly affection. The siblings hug Malphar closely, telling Kudo that her presence means instantaneous haze demolition. Truly a follicular disaster scenario for the group. Kudo stands with folded arms and a stiff torso, positioning herself near the group while mentioning claims of her specific behavioral code. Kudo turns her head toward Ulfen, who is stationary near the vegetation, and addresses her with a visible show of teeth. Kudo lunges forward and pulls Ulfen into a large embrace, as Ulfen remains rigid while Kudo asks about her previous history of deeds. Kudo presses her face against Ulfen like an oversized eager dog, while Ulfen pushes back firmly, querying the reason for this physical contact. Sister Malphar looks around the area and vocalizes a query regarding Asta, since she hears that visually confirmed the presence of the newest member. Hyfried and his spouse note Asta is at the training site, which makes Kudo stop moving and observe the space quietly. The screen focuses on Kudo looking aside, already adjusting her position as she prepares to interact with the newest family individual. Within the foliage, a massive stream of crimson and obsidian magic rises up, indicating Asta is utilizing high amounts of physical power. Asta moves in a fast sequence inside a glowing vortex, breathing at a high rate while attempting to maintain his grip on power. A visual show of Asta features drops of liquid on his skin and clenched teeth, as he mentions his current progress level aloud. Asta holds a luminous blade with wide eyelids, thinking that while the item creation is successful, maintaining it challenges his physical stamina. Asta stands inside a large circular indentation in the soil, staring at his palms and considering the requirements for increased physical capacity. Suddenly, a voice from the greenery mentions his activity, and Asta looks over his shoulder at Kudo who is observing from nearby. Asta rotates his entire body with wide eyes, asking if Sister Kudo has completed her travels and arrived back at this home. Kudo shows a specific upward curve of the mouth, mentioning it is quite cold that he failed to appear for her return. She moves into closer range, asking if he considers himself too high to notice her, as she attempts to obtain a vocal reply. Asta looks toward her with a level gaze and admits he observed her participation in various mission reports during his recent studies. We see a shiny metal disc attached to Kudo's jacket, as Asta remarks she was the only recipient of that specific award recently. Asta holds his sword handle firmly, stating that high perception is necessary for his goals, which makes Kudo adjust her mouth instantly. Kudo shows a focused gaze and queries if he declined the successor role solely for her, asking for the logic behind that action. Asta looks away with fluid on his face, suspecting Hyfried spoke far too much and caused this current verbal encounter between them. Kudo's mouth moves in a close shot, as Asta explains with words that his skill measurements simply are not up to standard yet. Kudo walks past, mentioning that both men show her images of desired positions, or mouth set in a straight line during movement. Asta turns his head quickly with an alert expression, sensing a large change in the surrounding atmospheric conditions. Kudo draws her broad weapon and cleaves through a large plant in one blue motion, forcing the surrounding air to show visual ripples. The plant breaks into many small pieces, while Asta moves into a low position and yells regarding her sudden object destruction. Asta stays low to the ground near the floating dust, alert to the surroundings as he sees his sibling has changed her posture. Kyudo stands on the path she just cleared, leaning a sword on her shoulder, and says it is time for a family assessment. Kyudo shows a show of teeth and states her intention to use more force, standing firmly in preparation for an immediate exchange. Asta begs his sister to pause the murder attempt, hollering that his glowing butter knife is basically broken and definitely not combat ready yet. Kyudo shuts him down instantly, wondering if he plans to offer that pathetic sub-story to some real killer on a bloody battlefield one day. Asta goes mute as her harsh logic lens, mulling over that single terrifying word, opponent, as reality starts to bite him hard. Kyudo preaches that proper knights must stay prepared for violence constantly, delivering a rough wake-up call involving a lot of sharp edges. She zooms ahead like a caffeinated lightning bolt, weapon shining blue, while Asta struggles to keep his shaky laser blade from falling apart. Red sparks fly as Asta accepts his fate, suspecting that if he remains a punching bag, his lovely sister might actually accidentally delete him. Steel bangs loudly as Asta catches her downward swing, painting the area in colorful sparks while they play this very intense sibling rivalry game. Asta earns an unexpected guided tour of the woods, flipping through branches because the sheer impact of her swing launched him into orbit. Kyudo charges again with her sword humming, teasing the boy while feeling mildly surprised he can handle her prow moves, but she is far from finished. Asta regains his footing, red ore wobbling near his hand, though Kyudo giggles at his vibrating glow stick, calling it a total disgrace to weaponry. Asta slides across the lawn while Kyudo owns the stage, bluntly stating that his talent for martyr manipulation is roughly equal to zero currently. Asta wheezes for oxygen, flaring with raw determination, realizing that his sister has remained exactly as terrifying as his childhood nightmare suggested, standing like a legendary dungeon villain. The story reminds us that Kyudo has basically been a high-level threat since she wore size 2 shoes. Memory begins, featuring mini Kyudo bullying microscopic Asta with a plank of wood, asserting dominance simply because he's the sole boy around. Small Kyudo was a pine-sized nightmare, starting fights and crying foul, which explains why his vintage mental snapshots feature such high anxiety levels. Returning to today, a heavy bang shakes the dirt, convincing Asta that honestly, this girl is his biological nemesis designed specifically for torment. Zooming into Asta's eyeball, his brain processes the hard truth, specifically that hiding behind his guard will get him absolutely nowhere right now. Primary colors explode everywhere as a sonic boom rebels the foliage, with both siblings glued together in a stubborn stalemate of sharp edges. Kyudo invades his personal space, as beaming, screaming that he will never lead the clan if he cannot manage a basic sparring match. Elsewhere at home, Alphen stares at the orange horizon, looking like she might faint from stress over the murder game in the trees. She quizzes Hi-Fried on his questionable parenting, panicking that this little family outing might result in a trip to the nearest morgue soon. Dad is a picture of relaxation, labeling them friendly rivals and downplaying the carnage, which are classic famous last words for any generic parent. Alphen rolls her eyes at the optimism, silently praying he is correct, knowing Kyudo becomes a total berserker once the blubs come off properly. During the chat, Alphen wonders if bringing the sisters home was strictly business, sensing a much stinkier secret hiding behind the boring inheritance dork. Hi-Fried rummages through his desk with a lun face, eventually producing a single envelope that contains the power to ruin everyone's whole week. Alphen's jaw drops when she identifies the fancy wax seal, recognizing it instantly as a specific disaster she had been frantically hoping to avoid. It is a formal invite from the Elmheim head office, meaning the dusty old creeps who run the clan are finally poking their noses in. A spooky overlay displays the silhouette of ancient relatives, who apparently heard some tea and now wish to inspect the grandson's face personally. Alphen wrings her fingers, grasping the gravity of the news, since involvement from headquarters usually means everyone is going to have a very bad time. Hi-Fried looks like he swallowed gravel, understanding that in the worst scenario, Asta could be snatched away by the higher-ups' dirty political games. We switch back to the forest where a colossal explosion of light indicates the battle has truly reached its absolute climax. The previous warnings from Hi-Fried about Asta potentially going rogue still loom large over the events unfolding. Asta yells back at Kyudo, telling her to stop being so utterly ridiculous in her demands. He points out that he already refused the succession once, and he won't let her goading comments actually get to him. Kyudo swings her blade with enough force to generate a powerful vacuum, countering that his refusal is disagreeable in and of itself. Clearly, she is taking this entire situation far too personally. With a very loud clang, Asta successfully blocks a heavy strike, but he is clearly struggling under the sheer weight of her physical attack. He mentally notes that she must be incredibly heady as he fights to hold his position on the ground. Asta compares her technique to a giant troll swinging a massive mallet. She is relying entirely on raw brute force combined with her overpowering blue monitor to overwhelm and crush him. The close-up shot focuses on Asta's hand gripping Graham, and you can see the red magic pulsing erratically. He's reaching his absolute limit just trying to keep the volatile blade from disintegrating. Kyudo leans into the clash, her bright blue ore completely overpowering Asta's flickering red flames. She's physically pushing him back into the dirt, forcing him to lose ground. Asta grits his teeth tightly, attempting to interject a word into her monologue. He's desperately begging her to listen, but Kyudo is completely fixated on the fight. Kyudo simply gives him a predatory smirk and asks if he was actually trying to run away. She informs him that she has no intention of letting him off the hook quite so easily. Boom. She delivers a massive, blue-blowing strike that sends Asta hurtling backward through the air. The resulting shockwave alone causes the surrounding ground to fracture deeply. Asta skids through the grass, coughing harshly and clutching his chest where he took the blow. He wheezes out a comment about her impressive and ridiculous brute strength. Kyudo stands over him, beginning her lecture. She tells him that if he can only manage to swing a sword, then he is merely third-rate in skill. She continues her lengthy monologue, stating he is only second-rate if he can solely handle magic. She is clearly setting an impossibly high standard for her little brother to achieve. A wide shot shows the massive destruction they had caused throughout the forest. She declares that one only truly becomes first-rate once they master both sword and magic in perfect combination. She looks down at him with a look of genuine disappointment. She admits she expected much more from the kid who supposedly possesses 7 whole wings. We receive a quick magic lesson explaining that a 1-wing difference results in a 3-fold gap in power. That represents a truly massive increase in magical output and personal stamina. She points out that as a 5-wing user, she should theoretically be 2 full stages inferior to his 7 wings. On paper, she shouldn't even be able to land a hit on him. Yet, despite all the facts, here he stands, actively avoiding a direct clash of power and resorting to basic, simple swordsmanship. She immediately calls him a coward for this. She offers him a mocking smile and asks if he really distrusts his own potential and power that much. She is clearly aiming for his biggest emotional vulnerability. She delivers the ultimate question: is he actually afraid of going berserk once again, just like he did 3 years in the past? That particular memory is clearly a very deep sore spot for him. Astor's eyes go wide in sudden shock as the realization hits him like an express train. He wonders to himself if he has truly been afraid of the full power of the 7 wings. He stands up slowly, finally realizing that he had subconsciously been putting a firm limit on his own potential all this time. He was deliberately handicapping himself due to his own personal fear. He looks at the magic sword. He finally understands that the blade had been unstable because he was attempting to forcibly suppress his own innate magical abilities. Tudo becomes even angrier, shouting that Astor possesses absolutely everything she has ever wanted in life. She is consumed by jealousy over the amazing gift he is wasting. She unleashes another massive blue energy blast, stating that if he insists on being so arrogant as to let his talent rot, she will simply crush it for him. Tudo is no longer holding back a single ounce of her power. She charges forward, enveloped in a whirlwind of blue energy, screaming at him to give all of his power to her because she wants to witness his true abilities. The tight close-up shows Astor gripping the hilt of his magic blade in the shatters. Blue energy shards fly past him as he braces himself for her ultimate attack, finally ready to unleash his real strength. A massive, earth-shattering clash of blue and red energy illuminates the entire scene. Astor stands as a small silhouette right in the middle of a blinding red explosion, completely halting her momentum. Tudo looks absolutely shocked, her face illuminated by the powerful red glow of Astor's magic. She screams, completely unable to believe he managed to knock back her full force strike, stunned that he actually stopped her strongest attack in its tracks. Astor looks up at her with a terrifyingly confident grin, his golden eyes glowing intensely through the red ore. He thanks her, explaining that she helped open his eyes, signifying that he has officially leveled up mentally and accepted his power. Like a caffeine-fueled rocket, Astor zips toward Tudo while trailing enough exhaust to trigger a forest fire. She stares, bewildered that he is attacking without a sharp stick in hand. His frantic hustle has completely bamboozled her usual defensive vibes. Perspiring heavily, Tudo worries she broke him. She doubts her gas tank is empty, yet the little gremlin is, floating around looking all ominous. Hovering like an angry ruby, he starts utilizing the secret source buried inside those weird feathered appendages on his back, funneling his entire mystical wallet into one single shove. He triggers a bright flash that makes the clashing sticks look like a supernova, sliding across the dirt like a confused goalie. Her face is pure comedy, brainstorming a win that quickly really was not on her bingo card. Posing inside the hazy smoke with a serious smug, he refuses to squander this bonus round he somehow secured from the cosmos. Gaze upon that lower back, it is a shiny red symbol oozing with juice. He is finally grabbing his deer, his mojo, and his latest relatives. Memories of Highfried and the local gang flood his brain. These friendship points were locked away in his old save file, despite his massive grinding. Staring like she's watching a cat do math, she murmurs second, oblivious to the existential drama he's actually yapping about. Staying silent, he teleports in a crimson puff. He is basically a vibrating cloud of chaos that forgot how friction her eyes work, leaving neon streaks like a night rider. He dances through her guard. Her eyeballs are struggling to follow the impending doom he's delivering. Frozen in place, she fails to make even a squeak upon realizing that her opponent has basically glitched out of reality. Spinning in circles like a frantic compass, she sees Zero Astors. The boy has literally transmuted into a stiff, spooky breeze. Suddenly he is right at her back with a bright yellow iris twinkling. He mutters about going all out, and then things go boom. Tossing a gigantic ruby swipe that turns the woods into a nightclub, he gives Sis a masterclass on how to actually win a fight. Tudo eventually peels her eyes open in a duvet, looking like she just lost an argument with a freight train. It is total Monday energy. Peering around, she realizes this is her actual dorm room. Questions about the match and her mysterious transport service are doing backflips in her brain. Someone mentions he's no longer unconscious. Malphar is hovering nearby, as collected as a frozen cucumber. Tudo blinks upward, attempting to evict the mental cobwebs. Yanking the blinds to blind everyone, Malphar notes that the slumber was quite lengthy. That is polite and untorqued for saying she was totally Breck. Springing up like a startled jack-in-the-box, she yells about the scuffle. She recalls some aggressive contact, then silence. Her memory is basically pure static now. Flashing a sneaky grin, Malphar spills the beans. The shrimp was a designated driver who lugged her home. Cue the montage of him struggling with her weight. The official report claims Kudo took a mid-combat nap due to travel fatigue. Malphar swallows the lie, but Kudo knows her eyelids were not that heady. Quietly seething, she realizes the nap theory is absolute hogwash. Nobody hits the snooze button while swords are clanging around their ears on purpose. Her mind reels back to the finale. She was prepping a haymaker that would delete his existence, then reality suddenly decided to switch channels. Truthfully, the rascal probably deleted his glowing stick right before crunch time. It was not a miss, he just clicked save on her vital organs. She recalls the laughter of a magical vapor drifting through her skeleton. His ability to micromanage that much raw power is actually getting kind of creepy now. She reflects on his later appearance, mimicking a harmless tiny sibling who would apologize to a fly for being too loud nearby. She tries convincing her brain that he would never actually turn his own big sister into human shish kebab. However, those spooky killer eyeballs haunt her memories. For a heartbeat, she expected him to close her tab permanently. This toddler is packing hidden spicy depths. Grinning, she labels him a salty runt despite his height deficiency. She is obviously starting to think he might actually be a threat worth worrying about. Kudo isn't exactly known for her patience. She's already out of bed, gripping her blade, and loudly demanding to know the whereabouts of her brother Astor. She's absolutely insistent on a do-over right now, declaring she refuses to accept the previous fight ending in a draw, promising to go full power from the first second. Malphar just stared back at her with zero emotion and informed her that Astor had already departed. Kudo froze instantly, completely deflated by the news. Tudo couldn't believe her ears. Malphar explained that a formal summons for Asta arrived from the main branch, a development that absolutely never spells good things for anyone in the family. Malphar clarified that Asta had left some time ago, accompanied by the father. Kudo was genuinely furious that she had been completely excluded from knowing about such a momentous event. We find the carriage hurtling down the highway, with Asta and High Fried already well on their journey toward the main estate to face whatever trouble awaits them. Asta, for his part, stared impassively out the carriage window, appearing far too composed for someone about to meet the family's terrifying shadow leadership. High Fried sat opposite him, looking quite serious. He explained that the individuals they were scheduled to meet were the elders who secretly controlled the Elmheim household from behind the scenes. A quick shot of the sprawling main estate confirms its ominous reputation. These elders are former family heads and powerful figures who have essentially been manipulating events for multiple generations. Pyfried let out a deep, weary sigh. These people haven't paid the slightest bit of attention to Asta since his abduction, so why on earth were they demanding his presence now, out of nowhere? Asta, however, already had the answer. He believed it was directly related to the events at the recent Sword Dance Festival where he caused a stir, alerting the family's most influential figures. He mentioned hearing that these elders value the family's reputation far more highly than wealth or even their own existence, making them absolute dinosaurs regarding outdated traditions. He recalled a dark memory where those who damage the family's image are locked in cages and fed to predators. This family's internal politics are clearly beyond messed up. Pyfried looked at him, totally confused, demanding to know where Asta had heard such chilling tales. Asta simply kept his answer vague, avoiding any mention of his past memories. He dismissed the danger with a shrug, stating he was already mentally prepared for any consequence, whether punishment or exile. He was unbelievably calm about potentially being thrown to the wolves. Pyfried questioned if he was truly certain, considering he hadn't said farewell to his sisters. He knew the girls would be absolutely devastated by his abrupt departure. Asta replied that it was perfectly alright, since he had planned to leave immediately upon arrival at the estate anyway, preferring to avoid making a fuss. He cracked a slight smile, figuring Kudo would probably appreciate his absence, since he wouldn't be around to annoy her anymore, a classic little brother move. Asta glanced down at his hand resting on the sword hilt. He thought to himself that thanks to Kudo's influence, he was finally beginning to understand how to properly wield Gram. He sensed that he could pull out more power from the Seven Wing than at any point before. He looked at Highfried and ordered him to refrain from trying to intervene, regardless of what transpired. Highfried looked back at his son, understanding he was completely serious. He could clearly see Asta was truly prepared to navigate this difficult situation by himself. Highfried teased him a little, advising him to stop acting so arrogant when he was still the youngest in the group. He attempted to lighten the mood, but the underlying anxiety remained thick. Suddenly, Asta detected a familiar presence nearby, and his eye widened in surprise. Someone was unexpectedly waiting just outside the moving carriage. It turns out to be his sister Kudo. She was running alongside the window, having sprinted the entire distance from the estate, looking utterly exhausted yet completely resolute. The carriage came to a halt, and Kudo leaned over, desperately trying to catch her breath. Pyfried looked stunned, questioning if she truly ran the entire journey to reach them. She immediately climbed into the carriage, calling them heartless for departing without bothering to say a single word to her. She was visibly infuriated. She announced that she had heard every detail, including his summons by the great elders. Pyfried attempted to explain that she couldn't come alone, but Kudo was already comfortably seated. Kudo confirmed she knew she wasn't going with them, explaining she was only here because the father had instructed the sisters to return and manage the estate. She just wanted a proper farewell. Her expression then turned completely serious as he informed Asta that this summons meant he was in a situation demanding extreme caution. She recognized the genuine danger he faced. The scene cuts back to the terrifying main estate as Kudo revealed that Malphar had suggested Asta might not actually return home from this trip. Asta flashes a charming grin and insists he is being overly dramatic, swearing he is only visiting for a friendly chat, though everyone knows these ancient monsters snack on humans for breakfast. Kudo jabs a digit toward his nose and shouts that she utterly loathes his guts, showing no mercy during this verbal beatdown. Her grievance is still out, including his annoying gender, those fancy 7 wings, and the fact that he is clearly the favorite child. She continues ranting about him being physically superior despite her seniority, plus he behaves like a boring adult while still being the toddler. Asta patiently absorbs the insults from his lovely relative, realizing she might actually possess a soul. She informs him that despite his ridiculous power or mature vibes, he remains her tiny sibling forever. While Highfried watches this weird family bonding session quietly, she commands him to return in one piece for a fair mash, transforming this farewell into a binding legal contract for combat. Wearing a cocky grin, she refuses to let his cheap victory stand, clearly plotting her revenge before he even leaves the driveway. Kudo leaps from the speeding vehicle and sticks the landing like a pro, proving she is a total action hero. Asta watches her retreating figure through the glass while Highfried laughs, commenting that the boy finally found a worthy opponent to hate. Asta beams with sincere warmth and silently appreciates his sibling, finally noticing that this replacement family might not be so bad. The wheels roll toward that scary mansion as the sun dips low, and Asta swears to return, knowing the true nightmare begins. The pair reaches the giant entrance of the estate where the welcome wagon is definitely broken, since the stiff guards greet Highfried with enough awkwardness to choke a horse. Those statuesque sentries grip their weapons while announcing that the ancient boss is currently lurking indoors and specifically expecting their arrival with very suspicious eagerness. Highfried acts like he owns the joint and rejects a tour, but the stubborn guard insists on escorting them like they are common criminals caught stealing cookies from the jar. Strolling through corridors bathed in creepy blood-red lights, Asta understands this visit lacks any grandparental love, and he's definitely not getting a hug or a sweater today. Asta maintains a poker face while his glowing eyes scan for danger, feeling fully equipped to dismantle whatever nonsense these wrinkled geezers have planned for him. Approaching the heart of the fortress, Asta stares at the stone walls and feels a wave of nostalgia, remembering his past life when this place was actually home. Passing by the patio where newbies are sweating, Pyfried whispers a final caution for Asta to keep his chill, even if the old folks start roasting him alive. The boy looks slightly constipated while hearing his fake dad insist that he must keep his cool, regardless of how many insults the geezers hurl at him. Fried seems ready for a nap just contemplating this disaster, explaining to the kid that the upcoming audience members are the true source of the headaches. Asta pays attention while the man describes the legendary Dronzer in charge, feeling the aged heady with doom as they approach the big chair room. Asta spots the lack of dollies in the crowd of fancy people, accurately assuming the loser is currently crying in a corner because his primary hand got turned into pulp. Fry catches the boy daydreaming and checks if his brain is still working, prompting Asta to snap to attention and offer a respectful nod of agreement. They march through the massive arches surrounded by quiet muscle, enduring a trek specifically choreographed to make them feel small and insignificant. Asta trails behind and vows to keep his mouth shut, actually listening to the girl's advice about returning home without being chopped into tiny pieces. They arrive at the giant entrance as a sinister cackle rings out from within, indicating that some weirdo is having way too much fun with this. The portal flies open to reveal a giant room where a loud announcer screams that the noble father and his two boys have finally appeared. He is a marathon hike across the rug toward the fancy furniture, while dozens of scary VIPs stare at Asta like he is a bug under a microscope. A fossil with a snowy beard and a giant head wound shouts at Fried, calling him grandson and confirming he is indeed the grumpy patriarch of the family. Fried immediately dropped to one knee, offering his utmost respect. He addressed the elder as the sixth head, noting how much time had passed since the last meeting. Fried leaned in and whispered to Asta that this individual was actually his great-grandfather. The entire weight of family legacy was literally resting on the throne. Observe the expression on this elderly gentleman's face. He looks absolutely terrifying. This is Densei Elmheim, the sixth patriarch, radiating pure, chilling authority. Asta scanned the room and recognized Malfar, Ulfin's sister, along with the arrogant blue-haired noble from before. He realized all the powerful figures of the family had gathered for this formal judgment. Asta spoke up, asking the obvious question. Is Roderick not present? He was specifically looking for the man directly responsible for destroying his life. The old man confirmed that the current family leader was absent. He looked down upon Asta with a truly condescending expression. A frightening purple and red ore suddenly ignited around the sixth head. He explained that Roderick was currently occupied leading the knights directly in service to the royal family. He claimed Roderick was far too busy for such trivialities, implying Asta wasn't even worth the Duke's consideration. Instead, he said the old veterans would handle the situation. Asta kept his cool, but thought to himself that in his previous existence, he never even got close enough to see this man. He had been considered too insignificant to enter the same room. Asta observed the old man, knowing that for someone supposedly retired, he still clearly commanded an immense amount of influence over the entire family structure. Fried looked up, visibly concerned, and asked what exactly constituted these trivialities. He sensed a hidden agenda at play. The elder chuckled mincingly, suggesting Fried must have already guessed the reason. He then brought up the embarrassing scene Asta had caused during the recent sword dance festival. Asta's golden eyes narrowed as he realized the true purpose of this meeting revolved around the duel. The elders were furious that a branch family member had humiliated the main house. Fried attempted to defend his son, claiming the duel was merely a staged performance for the public. He was desperately trying to minimize the seriousness of the incident. Another elder, sporting a prominent mustache and a purple aura, began yelling. He screamed that regardless of the circumstances, Asta's actions had tarnished the sacred Elmheim name. The sixth patriarch continued the verbal assault, stating that allowing a child of unknown origins into the family had been a critical error from the beginning. He immediately suggested exile or worse. Asta finally snapped. He stood up from his kneeling position and demanded they stop. He told them that his father had nothing to do with the situation. He stood tall and took complete responsibility for everything. Fried stared at him in utter disbelief, probably wishing the kid had simply remained silent. Fried silently lowered his head. He was caught between his sworn loyalty to the family and his deep affection for the boy he had raised as his own. The sixth head looked at Asta with pure contempt. He informed the young man that his discipline was clearly still lacking. He mocked Asta for being a child attempting to interfere in an adult discussion. The arrogance displayed by everyone in the room was truly astonishing. The old man started talking about the 12,000 knights serving under their banner. He explained that these soldiers bore the entire responsibility for the Elmheim name. He warned Asta that the knights were a unified force. He added that countless others were watching from the shadows, eager to seize the top position whenever the opportunity arose. He glanced around at the other nobles present, including Malfar and the blue-haired fellow, noting that even those in the room were potential threats to their authority. He slammed his cane down forcefully, claiming all they desired was peace of mind. He demanded proof that Asta would cause no further damage to the Elmheim legacy. Fried's eyes widened in horror as he realized a terrible event was approaching. The old man was reaching for something specific. The great elder presented a sword hilt glowing with a mincing red light. He asked Fried if he remembered the time he failed to protect the previous lord, resulting in his arm being disgraced. He looked down at Fried, still kneeling, and declared it was time to finally settle the debt. He wanted Fried to prove his loyalty right then and there. The shocking command was issued. The great elder ordered Fried to demonstrate his loyalty by executing the boy. He was literally commanding a father to kill his own son. The camera zoomed in on Asta's golden eye. He was completely dumbfounded. He knew these individuals were terrible people, but he never imagined they would go to such extremes. Fried didn't blink once, staring his grandfather down as he flatly refused. The old man definitely miscalculated there. Fried declared he would rather take his own life than harm his own son. Asta gazed at his father, filled with profound gratitude and understanding. The great elder responded with chilling indifference, simply saying very well. He clearly considered the discussion finished. He slammed his cane against the floor once more. That particular sound almost always meant someone was about to die. He bellowed that death was fine and informed Fried that his wife, his daughters, and the boy would all join him in execution. These individuals were clearly certifiable psychopaths. Instantly, guards throughout the chamber drew their blades, encircling the pair. The great elder then declared that the Viscount's lineage was officially terminated, effective immediately. Asta finally broke his silence, his voice chilling the calm. He asked exactly what his great-grandfather was so terrified of, refusing to give ground. The old man seemed genuinely bewildered as Asta continued, describing the entire group of grown, trembling men huddled together as utterly pathetic. Asta remained standing amidst the guards, telling the elders they were welcome to exile or eliminate him however they wished, assuming they were genuinely terrified of him. Asta seized his collar, his inner energy starting to burn brightly. He promised them that if they dared harm a single member of his family, they would profoundly regret it, tearing his shirt apart. Astor apologized to Highfried for his inability to remain silent. The time for hiding was officially over. The guard nearby began shaking uncontrollably, stammering about what he was seeing as he focused on Astor's back. The crest was shown up close, displaying 7 wings radiating an intense fiery crimson light. It represented absolute authority in this realm. Astor was engulfed in a massive, swirling cyclone of scarlet energy. He warned them that if it persisted, these 7 winds would transform into the single greatest threat the Elmheim family had ever encountered. Astor turned his head, revealing a single glowing, terrifying yellow eye. He informed the elders that a moment of careful thought about the next move was highly recommended. This kid was officially the most intimidating person in the room. The elders were clearly losing their collective minds, as seeing the 7-winged emblem on Astor's back caused them to question reality itself, prompting one to literally whisper that it simply wasn't possible. The must-showed noble was sweating profusely, insisting on knowing if the crest was just some exceptionally convincing fake. He noted that it had been multiple centuries since that mark last materialized on a human. The elder with blonde hair appeared close to suffering a heart attack. He confessed that, despite the passage of time, the crest was unequivocally the genuine article. Dennis, the great elder, was grinding his teeth so forcefully they nearly cracked. He insulted Astor as a little brat, then asked if the boy truly grasped the significance of what he was revealing to them. Astor stood completely still, his back to the elders, letting the glowing crest speak volumes. Dennis was practically vibrating with fury, reiterating his demand to know if the boy grasped the fallout of this public display. Astor glanced back, wearing a confident smirk that suggested he was fully aware, and simply said yes. He then casually remarked that people typically freaked out more the higher the number of winds displayed. Then, the specific blue-haired noble just started laughing uncontrollably. He found the entire 7-wing revelation incredibly amusing, while everyone else was absolutely terrified. The mustachioed noble was clearly displeased by the laughter, but the blue-haired fellow merely waved him away. The atmosphere in the chamber was quickly becoming completely bizarre. Dennis launched into a history lecture, clarifying that wing emblems originally served as conduits for magical power, shared between spirits and humans. He maintained an intense expression while detailing the family lore. The narration presented a stylized vision depicting the power passed down through generations. Dennis explained that status in this society was determined entirely by this divine bloodline. Astor appeared skeptical, questioning whether Dennis was suggesting he belonged to an ancient spirit clan. He clearly wasn't convinced by this mystical origin story. Dennis paused momentarily, glaring intensely at Astor. He then admitted that if those 7 wings were truly legitimate, Astor could indeed be a direct descendant of the original lineage. Highfried was standing next to Astor, wearing the expression of a proud yet concerned father. Astor declared that he remained a child of the Viscount house, regardless of what was written on his skin. Astor took a step, deliberately crushing his discarded shirt beneath his boot. He informed the elders that his birth was no longer relevant, only the crucial question he was about to ask truly mattered. Astor remained encircled by spears, embodying the thesis 10-year-old in history. He inquired whether they possessed the actual resolve required to transform him into a permanent enemy. We glimpsed the insignias of various noble houses as Astor drops a significant bombshell. He warns everyone that if they try to kick him out, plenty of other martial families would be absolutely ecstatic to welcome a 7-wings user into their ranks. The scene zooms in on that distinct golden eye. Astor informs them they should actually be trying to keep him close, especially considering he might just surpass 2 Cardric in power. The elders are now visibly sweating. They realize that a 7-wings user serving as a living trophy for their rivals would be an unmitigated catastrophe. Astor proceeds to paint an extremely bleak portrait of the future. He describes a massive civil war that eventually consumes the entire nation. He then mentions having witnessed a future like that before, giving a clever little reference to his past life. Astor stands in the center of the audience hall, his glowing red family crest clearly visible from behind. He tells them he wants to use this gathering to precisely differentiate between his allies and his enemies. Dennis starts laughing loudly, like a truly ridiculous cartoon supervillain. He asks Astor if the child genuinely thinks he holds enough value to be issuing demands to the main house. Astor responds with an icy smile. He tells Dennis that if he honestly believes Astor has no worth, he should simply execute him right now. Otherwise, prepare for a war between them. Dennis grinds his teeth, his hand tightening into a fist. He understands that killing a child is easy enough, but if Astor is actually speaking the truth, the Elmheim family faces serious trouble. The close-up shot focuses on Dennis's hand, which is noticeably shaking. The former head of the family is feeling immense pressure from a boy who hasn't even reached puberty yet. The blue-haired noble observes that the discussion has simply devolved into a repetitive loop. He announces he's ready to introduce a change of pace. The blue-haired individual, Count Maze, leans in with a disturbing grin. He proposes that since dialogue isn't working, perhaps they should impose a trial on a store to verify his true capabilities. Count Maze rises to his feet, making a great show of it. He claims everyone in the room is secretly itching to see exactly what the 7-wings power can actually achieve. He gives a dark look, suggesting it won't be too late to determine a store's fate after the trial is finished. This guy clearly has an ulterior motive. Count Maze then mocks the Elmheim mansion, questioning whether this world-renowned martial clan actually possesses a trial challenging enough for someone with so much power. The store stares at Maze, immediately recognizing the name. He realizes there's no mistake. This man is a major political player he absolutely needs to be wary of. Dennis finally concedes, agreeing with a simple very well. He stands up, looking entirely ready to just get this entire situation over with. Dennis commands a store to follow him. He's taking the boy somewhere unique to see if he can truly back up his boastful words. The great elder walks past his store, telling him that teaching a grandson proper manners is part of his responsibility as an older man. He is still attempting to assert authority over the boy. They arrive at the trial grounds, and goodness, this place is incredibly creepy. It's a vast underground chamber featuring heavy chains and absolutely zero natural light sources. Dennis explains that this location is an underground bunker connected to the waterways. In all honesty, it resembles a dungeon more than any kind of shelter. The elder reveals the condition of the trial. They keep a single, enormous, magical creature confined down here. Store's test is straightforward, defeat the beast or perish. Highfried looks at his store and calls him a bothersome young man. He is clearly exhausted by his son's habit of constantly jumping into life or death situations. Store grips the hilt of his magic sword, appearing completely unfazed. He understands that he couldn't keep the seven-wing secret forever, so this seems like a perfect moment for a public display. Pyfried instructs him to stay alert and not lower his defenses. He is a genuinely concerned father, through and through. Store leaps onto a descending chain and announces he's leaving. Talk about having absolutely no fear of heights or giant monsters. Count Maze observes from above with a dark smirk. He is obviously hoping for some kind of exciting outcome to happen down in that pit. Astor's boots splash down into some shallow water at the bottom. He notes that the location is exactly as gloomy and unsettling as he anticipated. He stands within the darkness, his eyes radiating a golden light. He states that while it is dark, it won't be sufficient to conceal what is coming next. Astor looks up at the distant opening far above him. Dennis yells down that he at least gave Astor a chance to clear his name, but it unfortunately did not end favorably. A figure is huddled in the darkness, and it turns out to be Dolly's, shivering violently and covered head to toe in filth. Dennis comments that the kid was crying and screaming so hysterically that watching him became physically exhausting. An enormous, chattery shape materializes behind the broken Dollies. Astor quickly draws his sword hilt, sensing the immense beast is lurking somewhere in the same room as them. Suddenly, a colossal blue gorilla-like creature with terrifying glowing red eyes leaps out of the shadows. It looks completely feral and appears ready to instantly tear someone to pieces. Astor holds his position against the monstrous threat. The narrator announces that the main event is officially beginning now, promising an epic display of skill. The giant blue beast looms over Astor, yet the kid remains completely unafraid. He stares it down in the dark underground chamber, patiently searching for an opportunity to attack. The monster lets loose a deafening roar, its red eyes burning with pure fury. Astor is a minuscule silhouette next to this thing, but he holds his ground as the beast prepares to lunge forward. Astor starts moving like a streak of lightning, easily dodging the beast's massive claws as it tries to flatten him. He weaves through the attacks with absurd agility, making the monster swing uselessly at thin air. Up on the balcony, the watching guards and nobles are completely flabbergasted. One of them lets out a shocked gasp as they realize the kid is somehow managing to keep pace with the creature. Astor keeps a serious expression, clenching his sword held tightly. He privately thinks that, compared to his challenging sister Kudo, this enormous monster actually seems quite relaxed and manageable. Purple smoke and a strange aura begin rising off the beast as it recovers from the initial exchange. Astor watches closely, realizing that this creature is clearly operating outside normal biological parameters. Astor's eye widens as the realization hits him like a lightning bolt. He thinks, there is no way, starting to sweat cold bullets as the atmospheric pressure in the room abruptly shifts. The beast becomes wreathed in sinister purple flames, looking even more grotesque than before. Astor confirms the horrifying truth. This creature isn't just a beast, it's actually an undead monster. Pyfried completely loses his composure up on the balcony, slamming his hands down and shouting about the undead creature. He demands to know why something so dangerous is being stored in the manor's basement. Dennis, the elderly patriarch, appears totally unconcerned by Pyfried's outburst. He calmly explains that the creature naturally gravitates toward the smell of death, which is why it settled down there. We see the beast snarling through the bars as Dennis continues his explanation. He mentions it simply crawled into the basement looking for food, and he decided to keep it as a convenient trial. Dennis gives a cold, chattery look, claiming the beast is quite useful for the family's needs. Apparently, it means they no longer have to worry about disposing of buddies. The noble with the mustache starts sweating nervously, pointing out that an undead is difficult even for elite knights to capture. He asks if Dennis real plans to stand there and wash a child of the family. Dennis remains completely indifferent, stating that if Astor dies, it merely confirms he was nothing more than a blowhard. In his mind, a prestigious wing crest without genuine power holds less value than a simple decoration. Astor glances up at the distant ceiling, silhouetted against the light from above. Dennis thinks privately that even if the boy perishes, there are still other ways to acquire what the family requires. Dennis exchanges looks with the mustache noble, offering a sinister hint about the situation. He suggests that Astor's demise might actually prove more convenient for the long-term objectives. Count Maze lets out a chilling laugh while staring through the bars with his intense blue eyes. He clearly came just to watch the violence unfold and seems to be thoroughly entertained by the high-stakes situation. Count Maze looks down with a cold, bored expression. He mucks Astor, thinking the kid made plenty of promises but is now about to become the main course for this undead creature. Astor skillfully dodges a barrage of pink and blue energy slashes from the beast. He reminds himself to maintain focus and avoid dying easily after surviving everything else he's faced so far. Astor weaves around the monster's limbs, realizing that his attacks aren't having any effect whatsoever. No matter where he strikes, there's no resistance, feeling like he's just hitting air. The beast's wounds vanish instantly, glowing with a purple light as they heal. Astor quickly understands that its healing abilities are far superior to those of any typical undead creature he's encountered before. Astor stares at the monster, recalling the fundamental rules of dealing with the supernatural. First and foremost, you can't simply kill an undead because it's already, deceased. He mentally reviews the standard procedures for disposal. You either incinerate them using sunlight or cleanse them with a blessed weapon. A quick mental image of flaming skeletons highlights how extremely specific those requirements truly are. Astor finds himself cornered between the massive creature and the stone wall. He understands perfectly that if you lack the proper tools, the most sensible strategy against the undead is to just run away. Naturally, our protagonist realizes that retreating from this situation isn't an option right now. He fixes the beast with his intense glowing golden eyes, knowing he must invent a new strategy to live through this. Astor tightens his grip on the hilt, concluding that surface-level strategies are useless here. He declares that being a seven wings is pointless unless he can use that power to validate his existence right this very instant. He glides forward inside a swirling nebula of crimson and magenta sparks, hoping to turn his target into a stylish floor mat with a really enthusiastic hug. Astor delivers a thumping high five to the floor, resulting in a decorative hole and a localized sandstorm, while pebbles decide to audition for low orbit flight. High above, the man with the fancy lip hair is doing a wobbly dance, his mouth wide as he surveys the bioluminescent light show currently occurring downstairs. The folks in uniform are white-knuckling the iron bars, their vocal cords vibrating at high frequencies, wondering if the spicy cloud actually deleted the problematic housefest. Dennis, the senior individual in fancy robes, inspects the smoke cloud, head slightly tilted as he takes a sudden visual interest in the light show below. Once the smog takes its lunch break, we see a stationary Asura in the middle of the pit, looking intensely at the lingering colored mists nearby. Dennis maintains a rigid posture in the low light zone, his lips barely moving as he observes the scene below with a fixed downward gaze. Asura mimics a caffeinated blur while dodging a heavy swinging limb, keeping a very specific number of centimeters between himself and those sharp pointy accessories. He is breathing quite audibly, sliding across the masonry like a person on a wet kitchen floor, while his throat produces various rhythmic sound effects. The large creature slides out from the fog looking remarkably pristine, causing Hyfried to activate his inner screaming voice while the monster raises a heady arm. Hyfried holds the metal bars with both hands, positioned like he is ready to win a sprint, while vocalizing his intent to relocate to the bottom floor. The other man in the plush cape blocks the exit, looking directly into eyes while sporting a very specific upward curve of the mouth. Hyfried is projecting his voice quite loudly at the other fellow, facial color shifting toward the red spectrum, while inquiring about the policy on passive observation. The fellow known as Mies gestures for everyone to use their eyeballs, keeping a smooth facial surface as he identifies small details on the horizon. He points a finger back at the depression in the ground, suggesting that Astor might have a very flashy trick tucked into his fancy fabric sleeves. Astor has decided to rearrange his facial features into an upward curve, keeping his chin elevated as he contemplates the operational efficiency of his recent upgrade. Astor remains as still as a mannequin while the large quadruped approaches, noticing that the beast is moving at a significantly lower number of miles per hour. The glow-in-the-dark cutlery Astor is holding emits a saturated scarlet light, pulsing like a disco ball while he prepares to swing for the bleachers. The vertical kinetic gesture sends the blade through the target, creating a colorful trail of static that looks like it is real, bubbling the monster's inner bits. Astor vocalizes at high volume while repeating his favorite sword-based choreography, standing inside a large collection of orange and red kinetic energy effects. Our protagonist is a spinning fan of property damage, turning his vicinity into a red whirlpool that makes it very difficult for the monster to organize its molecules. Pyfried stands as motionless as a statue with his eyelids wide open, focusing intensely on the vibrant light levels being generated by the juvenile downstairs. Metal rings are having an unbonding experience and rocks are taking flight as the magic wind heads north, making the room feel like a pressurized soda can. The folks upstairs are practicing their exit strategies, shouting that the architectural integrity is failing. Finally noticing that the kid has quite a high energy rating, the senior rope wearer washes from his high-altitude chair as the magic vapor rises, tracking the ascent of the bright particles toward his own elevated position. He stares into the red glow with eyelids completely retracted, lips parting as he registers the quantity of lumens currently being emitted from the lower level. Astor is currently the centerpiece of a magical red pillar that is redecorating the ceiling with new cracks, proving that the 7-wing setting is quite high.